Now, of course, there are a lot of sad stories too. This one is somebody at Goodwill who stands in line for a long time and feels invisible. Do you know that frustration when people just ignore you? That comes up a lot. We have stories, again, let's talk about cars. I'm going to get an oil change. I didn't want to have it done then, and I was treated rudely. So yes, someone had agency, but there was punishment when they used their agency in the form of a negative interpersonal experience. So we have about 4,000 of these stories, as I said. And we wanted to understand what is going on in dignity. Right? What are the effects of this? Step one. So we took all of these stories and we subjected them to a pretty straightforward linguistic analysis. And what this analysis will do with unstructured data is pull out all different kinds of ideas and emotions that are floating around in that data. And what we found here, and I know it's a little bit small, but I'll walk through it, is that the denial of dignity has a very distinct emotional profile. So to go back to Plato, it overrides the emotions in some cases. It takes control of them. The orange bar here is what happens when people feel their dignity is denied. The gray is when their dignity is affirmed. And the blue is just, you write about your day yesterday. So it's just normal. And what you see here is that when dignity is denied, so the orange bars, people are angry, they're more negative, and they're distrustful. That's a pretty bad experience. And if you're working in an organization and you see this among your employees, you see this among your customers, that's a problem. Those are very strong emotions, all to come from one single experience. Now, you could say, listen, those are emotions. Emotions are fine, but they go away. We don't really have to worry about that. We can give someone a discount. We can cheer them up. We can give them a free gift. We can recover. The problem is that not only do you get this distinct emotional profile, you get a very sophisticated cognitive structure that wraps around it. So we also took these stories and analyzed them in terms of the Flesch-Kincaid grade level. The higher the grade level, the more sophisticated the cognition is that's reflected in the language. So when you write about your day yesterday, you're a ninth grader. Why think that? But when we ask you to write about dignity at all, whether affirmed or denied, you think a little more. But that middle bar, when dignity is denied, that's the most sophisticated story we get. So that's a perfect storm for a company, right? I'm angry, I'm negative, and I don't trust you. And I have a lot of good reasons not to. That's not going to go anywhere. So here's what we've got. We'll put this here so we can play with our technology. So what we've walked through so far is we have these three pieces, right? We have representation, we have agency, and we have equality. We know that those things together are going to make people feel that their value, their inherent worth is affirmed as humans. And what we now know is that all of this turns into anger, negativity, and distrust on the negative side. And then flipping that, if we get it right, if we actually give people these things, then we get things like hope or anticipation, we get positivity, and we get trust. Those are all things that we care about in our interactions with companies. Interestingly, a few years ago, the Biden administration issued an executive order that was designed to enhance trust in government. And I thought that was a wonderful thing to do. It seems like a very worthwhile endeavor. The way that they wanted to do that was by decreasing what they call administrative burden, which makes a lot of sense. But as I was doing this work, and we don't have time to go into it right now, I did a whole sector of this in government, interactions with government. And what I found was, it's great if you give me less paperwork. It's great if you make my taxes easier to fill out. But a far more effective way to build trust is to make people feel that they're treated with respect. Okay, I have a whole bunch of data about the IRS. You would be shocked at how strong those memories are when people are treated with respect, particularly in interactions with the IRS, which is a low agency situation. Okay, so this is what we have. This is the construct. So again, the first thing I wanted to convince you was that marketplace dignity is actually a thing and that it matters here. The second thing I wanted to convince you of is that we can design experiences for this. And this is a lot of, I've been working with a number of pharmaceutical companies, interestingly, on this. because they've realized that people, for example, who suffer from rare and ultra rare diseases often feel stigmatized because they have those conditions. When people feel stigmatized, they aren't likely to identify themselves, raise their hand and say, no, I need that medication. Stigmatization is the polar opposite of dignity, and that is the denial of value of people. So what we do is we go in, we look at the consumer journey that their patients go on, and we think about how we can build these pieces into it. But I'm going to share a simpler story with you about how we did this in a marketing research context. So I run surveys all the time. We're running these online experiments kind of constantly. And there was an article in the Atlantic that pointed out that people who complete these surveys for us basically feel their dignity is profoundly denied. 4,000 people tell us these heart-wrenching stories about their lives, and we pay them $1.50 for it. So we thought, what if we can redesign this experience in a way that affirms these three things? Give people voice, make them be seen and heard, so representation. Give them agency, let them know they have a choice about how they engage with us, and make sure that they know that they are treated fairly. So this is what we did. We created this survey. We said, you're going to complete the survey, provide some data to us, and you might qualify to be in a high value panel, which we did in fact create. But we varied the way in which this survey was experienced. So in representation, again, I know this is small, basically we needed people to feel seen and heard. So we said in the high representation condition, you can tell us what name you want to be called by. And we're going to ask for your feedback at the end. That was very simple. It didn't cost us anything. It was a really easy change to make. And we thought, well, if that makes a difference, maybe we're going to get some outcomes that we care about. Then equality. Now here, the first time we did this, we made a mistake. The first time we did it, we said other people might get paid more than you. As you might guess, everyone then just hated us. Not interested. But here we said, let's just make it equal, unequal, which is to say everyone gets the same thing or everyone might get different things, right? You might get paid more. You might get paid less. You might do more work. You might do less work. But that's equality. Wasn't about better or worse. It was about different, the same. And then we had to get agency. So all we did was in one condition say, we've controlled this for you. It's a little bit paternalistic. It's sort of like, don't worry, you don't have to do anything. We got it. Okay. Or we say, hey, you can control it. In reality, the functionality is exactly the same. So these are kind of subtle. But here's what we first found. We found that by doing this, we could change the extent to which people felt each of these things. And those are, in my world, those are huge effects. People are very sensitive to changes in representation, agency, and equality or equity. So that was the first insight. Wow, people notice. They really do. And the second thing we realized was that when people felt that they were treated with these, when we varied these three things, they felt they were treated with more dignity. So our three-pillar construct made sense. So what you see here is we take those three things, how much they felt represented, how much agency they felt they had, and how fair they thought things were. We multiply those together, and then we predict the extent to which they felt their dignity was respected. And that's that line you see right. Okay? And consistent with our prior data, when we did this, people trusted us more to pay them on time. Now, this matters a lot because they'll start sending you emails if you don't pay them, right? And if they don't trust you, they're never going to do work for you again. So dignity, again, here increased trust. It also increased their likelihood to speak positively about the survey to other people. And that felt dignity predicted the extent to which people thought they would understand questions, their desire to participate, and their willingness to provide more information for us. That last measure was really important to Tom. Tom runs studies where they send people out into fairly remote locations, and they will only get people to talk to them for a little bit of time. The problem is that the researchers actually do want to know a lot about people. They want to understand their rich lived experience. They want to be able to design some kind of aid that will actually be experienced as respectful. But if people will only talk to you for 4 minutes, you can only learn so much. And so taking this data, he went back to the field and he said, we might get richer stories if we make sure that we're treating everybody we talk to with respect, by emphasizing these three characteristics. Okay. So bad emotions are not great, and cognitive structure that reinforces those emotions are not great. We don't want distrust, and we don't want negativity, and we certainly don't want anger. But emotions, we can manage them, and maybe those don't connect to business outcomes that everybody cares about. Now, as I've said before, dignity is part of the American Marketing Association Code of Ethics. If we want to be ethical, we have to care about this. And it's central in human rights. So if we care about human rights, we have to care about this. But what about the brass tacks, right? I teach at a business school. I love teaching at a business school, in part because there's always this question of, so what? How am I going to use this? Why should I invest in this? So I'm going to ask you to poll for a second. Tell me what you think. Okay. Which of these matters most? Just pick one. Increasing advertising persuasiveness, generating automatic empathy, word of mouth, or employee compensation and greater engagement. We have A's, we have some C's, a bunch of C's. Interesting. Good. Okay, Beth, you said C. Can I ask you why you would say that?
I think that word of mouth is huge for trust and dignity and recognition. If your friend that you trust is saying A plus B equals C, I'm not sure, but if someone I trust likes a product, I think I might like it too.
Yeah. Word of mouth is huge. And I'll share a case study with you where we were trying to work with this in biotech, because particularly in these areas where somebody tells you something didn't work well, you're never touching it, right? Okay. Abigail, you said A. Why'd you say A?
I think at the core, as much as I would like to note some of the others, at the core, I think it's like trying to capture something catchy that will get people's attention and thus get them to buy a good or service.
Yeah, right. And there's so many ads that don't persuade us at all. And if we had a longer conversation, if we were in person, we could talk about, I could ask you, what's the most persuasive ad you've seen in the last year? And it would be quiet. An ad that actually changed your perception. The truth is, most ads look kind of the same. And I used to do work in automotive, and it was the most frustrating thing because every one of you could design a car ad right now. You know exactly what they look like, right? There's a car, and it's going around the corner, and there's some water on one side and trees on another side, and there's some very attractive person driving it, and maybe they adjust the music, and then you see the wheel going backwards. They're all the same. It doesn't persuade you of anything. So if we can find a construct that actually does increase persuasion, holding everything else constant, that's pretty powerful. Emily, you said B. Tell me about that.
Empathy in customer service is really important. So just kind of playing off of the conversation that we've been having. But I do think that that's important.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how you can convey that. That's a much harder thing to do.
Yeah, right. Empathy is hard. It's very interesting. I did some work on empathetic caregiving a few years ago in skilled nursing facilities. It was very interesting because the organization I was working for, what they wanted was, they said, give us a measure we can take when people apply for jobs to figure out who has more empathy and who has less empathy, right? Oh, okay. So we created a measure, such as it was, and then we took it into the field. And we had all the skilled nursing facility employees at 10 different facilities complete it. And then we looked at the patient records on safety particularly. And to your point, Emily, it's hard because what we found was if those employees have too many patients, it doesn't matter how empathetic they are. They're completely burned out, right? I can, with everything in my heart, want to take care of somebody like they're my family. But if I've got 50 patients to take care of, it's not going to work. But if we can make empathy more automatic, just the go-to, we're pretty powerful. There are many things we can tell companies to do that will differentiate them, but in a way that's disconnected from the rest of the world. And there are things we can tell companies to do that are completely foundational, but that won't differentiate them. If we design for dignity in the context of our organization, we get both of those things. Something that's foundationally human and makes us unique and different, which is pretty remarkable.